For once, I thought maybe we would have a peaceful night. Mom was turning 70, and the Vermont Inn had done its best to make the little dining room look elegant. Gold candles flickered across a long table draped in cream linen. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. I had driven up from Boston the night before, bringing a pearl necklace I thought Mom might like. For a few hours, I wanted to forget that my brother Thomas and I had barely spoken in months. Mom looked beautiful, smaller than I remembered her silver hair pinned perfectly. She smiled at everyone telling the same story she always did about the winter Dad proposed in the snow. I caught myself smiling too. Maybe this time I thought we could leave old wounds alone. Then Thomas raised his glass. "Time to make things official," he said, his voice carrying through the soft music. He stood beside Mom, his face flushed from wine. The guests quieted as he reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of papers neatly folded in an envelope stamped with the seal of a notary. He laid the papers in front of me right between the cake and the bouquet of yellow roses. "Mom wants the house transferred," he said casually. "You will still have your name on record. Just sign here, Laura." I stared at him confused. "What are you talking about?" "Come on," he said, lowering his voice but keeping that smile that never reached his eyes. "You know the house is too much for Mom to manage. I am taking care of everything now. We are just making it official. It is what Dad would have wanted." I opened the first page. My stomach tightened. It was not a maintenance agreement. It was a full property transfer. Everything my parents ever owned would go under his name. I felt my hands shake. "You forged this, didn't you?" I whispered. Thomas's grin stiffened. "You owe this family after leaving. You make good money in Boston. I take care of Mom. You owe her security." "I owe no one my signature," I said quietly. The room had gone silent. Even the jazz stopped mid-note. Thomas leaned closer. I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You are not embarrassing Mom tonight," he hissed. He grabbed my wrist, pressed the pen into my fingers, and pushed my hand toward the paper. His grip hurt. "Sign it, Laura," he said loud enough for the nearest table to hear. I pulled my hand free and stood up. My chair scraped against the wood floor, the sound sharp enough to cut through the tension. "I'm not signing lies," I said, my voice trembling, but clear. People turned to look. Mom's face froze. "Laura, please," she whispered. "Not tonight." Thomas's expression twisted. "Fine," he said, too calm. Then his hand shot forward. The glass in his other hand shattered against my chest, and his fist followed, slamming into me with the full weight of his anger. I fell backward. My head hit the edge of the table, and for a moment the lights burst into 1,000 gold sparks. I heard the sharp inhale of the crowd, the clatter of silverware, the faint sound of someone shouting my name. Then everything went quiet. Warm liquid ran down my neck. I could smell the iron in my own blood mixing with spilled champagne and candle wax. Someone screamed. "Call 911, a woman yelled. Mom was crying, holding Thomas's arm, begging him to stop shouting. He was still shouting something about family loyalty, his voice breaking through the chaos like glass grinding on stone. The manager rushed over, and suddenly there were sirens outside. My vision blurred, the chandelier above me warping into a ring of light. I tried to speak, to tell someone about the papers, but my mouth wouldn't move. As paramedics lifted me, I saw Thomas standing by the table, breathing hard, staring down at the blood on the floor. Mom was beside him, one hand covering her mouth, the other clutching the papers against her chest. The ride to the hospital was a blur of red lights flashing through fogged windows. The paramedic kept asking me my name. I remember answering once, then fading again into the sound of the heart monitor. When I woke up in the ICU, the room was cold and quiet. A tube ran from my arm to a clear bag above me. My ribs felt like they were on fire. I looked down and saw the hospital bracelet around my wrist, the same hand he had forced the pin into. The papers were gone. My mother was silent, and my brother still smiled in the photographs hanging in the hallway of my mind. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, half promise, half prayer. He made me sign nothing, but I will make him regret everything. The first thing I heard when I woke up was the slow, rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside my bed. A thin line on the screen moved like a lazy heartbeat, steady but distant. The ceiling above me was white and too bright, and my throat felt dry as sandpaper. When I tried to move, pain shot through my chest like fire tearing down a curtain. A nurse noticed me stirring and smiled softly. "Good morning, Laura. You are at Rutland Regional Medical. You have a mild concussion and 2 cracked ribs, but you are stable now." Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as if she had repeated the same line 1,000 times before. I blinked, trying to recall where I was, why my ribs hurt, and then the memory slammed back all at once. The party, the papers, the sound of glass shattering my brother's face, twisting with rage. "Where is my mother?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "She was here earlier," the nurse said. "She left a note for you." She handed me a folded piece of hotel stationery with Mom's handwriting. "Rest, Laura. We will talk when you are calmer. Love, Mom." Calmer. As if being assaulted in front of 70 people was me losing my temper. I closed my eyes, gripping the paper until my knuckles turned white. The nurse adjusted my IV and added gently, "The police came by too. You might want to speak with them once you feel ready." "Police," I whispered. "Yes. Someone at the party called 911. It was classified as a family dispute." The phrase made my stomach twist. Family dispute. That was how people like Thomas got away with everything reduced to family matters. 2 hours later, Mom came. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling, but not from fear of what Thomas had done. From fear of what I might do. "You shouldn't have yelled at him," she said, sitting at the foot of my bed. "You embarrassed him, Laura. He was trying to protect the house." I stared at her in disbelief. "Protect it from who, me?" "You know how your brother is," she whispered. "He gets angry, but he means well. Please don't press charges. It will destroy what's left of our family." "He almost destroyed me," I said quietly. She flinched but didn't look away. "He's your brother." "And I'm your daughter," I said. "Does that mean less?" She didn't answer. I turned my head toward the window. The afternoon light spilled in like a thin ribbon, washing the sterile walls in pale gold. For a moment, I imagined I was back at the party, standing by the cake, holding my ground before everything fell apart. Mom placed her hand on mine, but her touch felt foreign, like someone trying to cover a wound that wasn't theirs. "Let's move past this," she said softly. "Thomas is ashamed of what happened. Is that what he told you?" I asked, my voice rising despite the ache in my ribs. "Did he tell you he forged the papers? Did he tell you he tried to force my hand? Or just that I embarrassed him?" She looked down, her silence louder than any confession. I took a deep breath, then let it out slowly, every inch of my chest screaming. "Mom, I said if you keep protecting him, you're telling him it's okay." Her eyes filled with tears. "He's all I have left of your father." I turned away, the heart monitor's steady rhythm now matching the pounding in my ears. "And what am I, Mom? The inconvenience that keeps surviving." She stood, clutching her purse, unable to meet my eyes. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said. When the door closed behind her, the room felt heavier, as if the air itself was grieving. I stared at the small table beside my bed, where someone had left my belongings, my phone, my necklace, and a clear evidence bag containing my torn dress. Blood had dried across the front, a deep brown stain beneath the satin. It wasn't just blood, it was proof. Proof that family could draw blood and still call it love. Hours passed. The nurse dimmed the lights, and the sound of the monitor became almost hypnotic. I thought about the papers, about how Thomas had looked at me like he owned everything in that room, including me. I had always been the quiet one, the one who let peace win over truth. But lying there, tasting the bitterness of silence, I understood something. Silence was not peace. Silence was surrender. When the doctor came to check on me, he said I could leave in 2 days if I avoided stress. I almost laughed. Stress was the air my family breathed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the moment when his fist hit me, how the world went white, how my mother's voice faded under the weight of my own heartbeat. I thought about Dad, how he used to tell me, "Never sign what you don't understand, Laura." He said it about contracts, but now it felt like prophecy. The next morning, a police officer knocked on my door. "Miss Keene," he said, his tone formal but kind. "We would like your statement. It appears this wasn't just a family dispute." I looked at him, my ribs still aching, and for the first time in years, I didn't hesitate. "Then let's call it what it was," I said. "It was assault." He nodded, pulling out his notepad. "And theft," I added quietly. "He tried to steal more than a house." "What else did he try to steal?" the officer asked. I met his eyes. "My name." When he left, I looked at the window again. The sun was higher now, spilling through the blinds like sharp white lines across the bed. I closed my eyes, my breath slow and measured, and whispered to myself, "He broke my ribs, but he'll learn what it means to break my silence." The hardest part wasn't the pain. It was realizing my mother thought I deserved it. I grew up in the same house that nearly destroyed me. The white farmhouse on Maple Hill looked peaceful from the outside, surrounded by apple trees and the sound of crickets in summer. But inside, silence had its own weight. My brother Thomas was born 6 years before me, and from the start it was clear who mattered most. He was the golden boy, the heir, the one Dad called my right hand. I was the helper, the quiet one, the one who fetched, cleaned, and listened. Dad used to say, "Your brother will build the business, Laura. You'll take care of the home." I was 12 when I realized that meant my dreams didn't count. When Thomas turned 16, Dad bought him a used Mustang. When I turned 16, Mom handed me her old sewing kit and said, "You can fix your own clothes now." I laughed, but the truth cut deep. Thomas could break things and get rewarded. I could fix things and get ignored. He was the storm, I was the quiet after. When Dad got sick in 2015, everything changed, but not in the way I hoped. I thought maybe facing death would make him softer, that he'd see both his children as equals. Instead, he called Thomas into the hospital room alone. When he came out, Thomas smirked, tossed the car keys in his hand, and said, "Guess who's in charge now?" Dad died 3 days later. The will named both of us heirs, but Thomas took control. Mom didn't question it. She was too scared of a confrontation, too used to his anger. I remember the first time he hit something in front of her. I was 17, he was 23. We argued about college money. He slammed the door so hard the frame cracked, then punched the wall until his knuckles bled. Mom screamed his name, but she didn't stop him. She never did. After that, any time we disagreed, he would throw something. Once it was a plate, once it was a chair. I learned to duck, to stay silent, to make peace before peace turned violent. Years later, when I left for Boston to study architecture, he said, "You think you're better than us." I said nothing. Leaving was the only rebellion I had left. I worked through college, paid every loan, built a life that wasn't controlled by his moods. But every trip home reminded me that the house was still his kingdom. He'd walk around Mom's kitchen, barking orders about repairs, lecturing her about taxes, about how women shouldn't handle property. I used to think if I stayed polite, if I kept sending money, he would soften. He never did. The older he got, the meaner he became. The more broke he was, the louder he shouted. By the time Mom turned 70, Thomas was drowning in debt. He'd lost his realtor license after a fraud complaint, something about a client's escrow funds disappearing. I remember asking him once, "What happened?" He just smirked and said, "Paperwork mistake." Paperwork. That word would come back to haunt me. He blamed me for his failures, told anyone who would listen that I'd abandoned the family. "She lives fancy in Boston while I take care of Mom." He'd say at church like he was some kind of saint. Mom believed him because it was easier than believing she raised a liar. When I called her, she'd whisper, "Don't provoke him, Laura. He's just under stress." Every warning sounded like an apology for him. Every apology sounded like a betrayal of me. By 2022, the calls became shorter. Every visit home felt colder. Once I walked into the kitchen and saw Thomas going through Mom's mail. He didn't even flinch. "Just organizing," he said. Later, I found out he'd redirected the property tax bills to his address. He was already building his trap one envelope at a time. The night before the party, I sat in my childhood room, now filled with boxes of old furniture. The wallpaper was peeling, and the window looked out at the orchard where Dad used to fix fences on weekends. I could almost hear his voice saying, "You're strong, Laura. You don't need to fight to prove it." But Dad was wrong. Sometimes you do. That night, I saw Thomas's truck in the driveway. I almost went down to talk to him to clear the air before the celebration. But then I heard him through the window talking to someone on speakerphone. Yeah, she'll sign, he said. She doesn't have the guts to stand up to me. Never did. The laughter on the other end made my stomach turn. I closed the curtains and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the old photograph of our family from 1998. Dad, in the middle, Thomas with his arm around him, and me half hidden behind Mom. Even then, I looked like a guest in my own house. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about the years of silence, the way Mom flinched whenever voices rose, the way I always made myself smaller to keep the peace. I realized peace built on fear isn't peace at all, it's paralysis. I promised myself that if he ever crossed that line again, I wouldn't stay quiet. I didn't know that promise would be tested so soon, under the glow of birthday candles and the sound of jazz. When I look back now, I can see how every crack in our family started long before that night. It started with a father who chose an heir instead of a son. It grew with a mother who mistook obedience for love. And it bloomed in a brother who learned that fear gets results. People say family shapes you. Ours didn't shape me. It broke me into pieces and dared me to build myself back together. I used to think that silence was respect, but silence, I learned, was just another bruise, one that never fades, one that lives beneath the skin, waiting for the right moment to ache again. 2 days after I was released from the hospital, the bruises on my ribs had turned yellow and purple. A sick mosaic of what my brother called love. I stood in my kitchen in Boston, still wearing the hospital band on my wrist, staring at my phone. The police had told me they would open a case if I provided documentation, but without the original papers Thomas had shoved in my face, it would be hard to prove intent. I needed those documents or proof they existed. I called the notary office listed on the envelope from that night. A tired-sounding receptionist answered. Yes, we notarized a deed transfer for Thomas Keene 3 days before your mother's birthday, she said, clicking her keyboard. Is there a problem? My heart skipped. Who signed it, Laura Keene, she replied, reading from her screen. Witnessed by a Mr. Dan Riker. Both signatures verified. I felt dizzy. That's impossible, I whispered. I was in Boston. Then someone used your ID, she said flatly. You might want to file a fraud report. When I hung up, I could feel my pulse pounding in my neck. I called Evelyn Ross, an old friend from college who had retired after 30 years as an estate lawyer. She arrived an hour later, her gray hair tied back, her eyes sharp behind reading glasses. Show me everything she said. I handed her the email printout from the notary office along with my own signature samples from my tax records. She compared them side by side and frowned. The curve on the K is identical, she said. Too identical. This isn't a forgery done by hand. It's a digital copy of your old signature. How could he get that, I asked. She looked at me. Have you ever sent him a signed document? A few. Tax forms for Mom. Maybe a power of attorney for her prescriptions. Evelyn nodded. He scanned one of those and pasted it onto this deed. Classic inheritance fraud. It's sloppy but effective if the victim stays silent. Victim, I repeated. The word made my stomach twist. You're not one if you fight, Evelyn said. But you have to move fast. He'll try to sell that property before the ink even dries. That night, I sat at my desk and scrolled through old emails. I found one from Thomas dated 2 weeks before the party. Need your digital signature for Mom's medical updates. Just reattach your usual scan. My breath caught. That was it. I had given him the weapon he used against me. I wanted to scream, but the city outside my window was asleep. I opened my drawer and pulled out Dad's old fountain pen, the one he used for signing contracts. It felt heavy like guilt. I whispered, I won't let you erase me. The next morning, Evelyn drove me to the county records office. We filed a claim of forged transfer. The clerk, a thin man with glasses, looked both bored and concerned as he read the form. This might take weeks, he said. Maybe months. I don't have months, I said. He's already forged my name once. Evelyn leaned forward. You'll expedite this. There's a criminal case attached. The clerk hesitated, then stamped the file. Fine. It's marked priority. We walked out into the bright, cold air, and for the first time since the attack, I felt a small flicker of control. That flicker didn't last long. That evening, I received a message from an unknown number. You made a mistake. Attached was a photo of the farmhouse at night, the porch light glowing my mother's silhouette visible through the kitchen window. The text continued, "Don't drag Mom into this. Drop it." My hands shook as I read it. I showed Evelyn. She swore softly. "He's threatening you. Save it. We'll add it to the file." "He's in Vermont," I said. "He knows where Mom is." "We'll call local law enforcement tomorrow," she replied. "For now, you need rest." Rest! The word felt like an insult. That night, I couldn't close my eyes. I kept seeing my mother holding those papers at the party, pressing them to her chest like they were something sacred. Did she know what she was holding? Did she know she was part of the theft? The next morning, I called her. "Mom, did Thomas bring you any documents to sign before your birthday?" Silence. "Mom." "He said it was for insurance," she finally said. "Why, Laura?" "What's happening?" "He used my name," I said. "He forged me. He's trying to steal the house." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "He wouldn't. He already did." "Laura, please," she whispered. "Don't make this worse. He said you were confused. The old pattern returned. He lied, she believed, and I bled." "Mom," I said quietly, "you don't have to choose sides. You just have to choose truth." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there for a long time, the dial tone humming like a reminder of every time she had chosen silence over justice. By noon, Evelyn called with news. "We got confirmation from the bank," she said. "He's moved the property into a shell company registered under his name. That's money laundering Laura. We can nail him for that, too." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, hollow. "He didn't just steal a deed," I said. "He stole my peace." Evelyn's voice softened. "Then take it back." That night, I wrote everything down: the hospital, the call, the forged signature, the threats. I printed each page and stacked them neatly in a folder labeled "The Deed That Never Was." I placed it beside my bed like armor. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the city in silence. I looked out the window and whispered to the darkness, "He forged my name once. Now I'll write the ending myself." The morning after I discovered the forged deed, Vermont was covered in frost. The maple trees outside the farmhouse looked like glass sculptures, beautiful and brittle, just like the relationship between me and my mother. I drove up from Boston before dawn, the highway silent except for the hum of tires on frozen asphalt. Every mile closer felt heavier. When I pulled into the driveway, Mom was already standing on the porch, wrapped in her wool shawl, her face pale from the cold and something deeper fear. She didn't greet me with a hug. She just said, "You shouldn't have brought lawyers into this, Laura." "He's furious." "He's a criminal, Mom," I said, trying to steady my voice. "He forged my name and attacked me. I can't pretend it didn't happen." "He's still your brother," she murmured. "And you're still my daughter," I said. "So why does it feel like only one of us matters?" She turned away, opening the door to let me in. The house smelled like cinnamon and dust, the scent of a place trapped in time. Thomas's coffee mug sat on the counter. He wasn't there, but his presence clung to everything: his jacket over the chair, his keys on the table, his boots by the door like trophies. I sat at the kitchen table where the morning light slanted across the old oak surface. "Mom, listen to me," I said. "He's been controlling your accounts. The house title's under a company name now. He's not protecting you. He's using you." She froze, eyes wide. "He told me you wanted to sell it and move me to a nursing home." The lie hit like another blow. "I would never do that," I said, voice trembling. "He said you were angry about the inheritance, that you wanted to punish him." "Punish him," I laughed bitterly. "He punched me into the ICU, Mom. Is that not punishment enough?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. Silence stretched between us like a wound. Finally, she whispered, "He's scared Laura. He lost his job, his friends. He said this house is all he has left. Then, he should have earned it, not stolen it." I stood, but my ribs screamed with pain. She reached out, touched my arm. "You're still hurt. Please just let it go." I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see a mother. I saw a woman who had lived too long under someone else's shadow. First Dad's, now Thomas's. She thought survival meant submission. I whispered, You raised me to believe silence keeps peace, but silence only feeds the wolves." Her hand trembled and fell away. I left before she could answer. Outside, the air was sharp, each breath slicing my lungs. I sat in the car and texted Evelyn. "He's poisoned her completely. I need to act." Within an hour, Evelyn filed for an emergency injunction under Vermont's Elder Financial Abuse Act. It wasn't just about the deed anymore, it was about protecting Mom from Thomas's manipulation. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "Drop it or I'll make sure you regret it." A photo followed my hospital ID bracelet torn in half. My pulse spiked. I forwarded it to Evelyn, who replied, "Documented. Do not respond. Police will handle it." But part of me wanted to respond to tell him I wasn't afraid anymore. Still, I stayed silent, knowing rage would only give him power. 2 days later, the sheriff's deputy called to confirm that Thomas had been served with notice of investigation. He denied everything, claimed I was mentally unstable. The deputy said, "We'll need your hospital report and any messages he sent." I scanned everything medical forms texts, even the blood-stained dress I'd kept in a plastic bag. It felt strange treating my pain like evidence, but that's what it had become. My life turned into exhibits A through D. That night, I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by papers, photos, and memories. Each one a reminder of how long I'd been the quiet one, the peacekeeper, the one who absorbed the blows so others wouldn't have to. I thought of Dad's last words, "Take care of your mother." I'd done that. But no one had told me who would take care of me. Around midnight, I received a voicemail from Mom. Her voice shook. "Laura, please stop this." Thomas said the sheriff embarrassed him in front of the neighbors. "He won't forgive you if this goes to court. Don't ruin the family." I deleted it before it finished. Family was already ruined. It just took me 39 years to admit it. The next morning, Evelyn called with an update. "We got the preliminary hearing next week." "Bring everything. He won't see it coming." "He'll come after me," I said. "He already did," she replied. Her words sat in my chest like iron. I looked at myself in the mirror, bruises, fading eyes sharper than they'd been in years. I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was angry, but not with the kind of anger that destroys. The kind that rebuilds. That evening, I drove to the lake near my apartment, the same spot I used to sketch buildings as a student. The water was still reflecting the orange glow of the sunset. I pulled out a notebook and started writing, not for the court, not for the police, for myself. I wrote about the night he hit me, about Mom's silence, about how fear shapes generations until someone finally says no. I ended with one line. He thought I'd protect the family over truth. He forgot truth is what makes a family. The next morning, I printed it and placed it on top of the evidence folder. When Evelyn arrived to review everything, she read that line aloud, her voice soft. "You're stronger than you think, Laura." "I'm just tired," I said. "Tired of surviving in silence." "Good," she said. "That's when people finally start fighting back." When she left, I sat by the window as snow began to fall again. Somewhere out there, my brother was probably raging, planning his next lie, his next excuse. But for once, I didn't flinch. I had learned that strength doesn't come from shouting louder, it comes from refusing to be silenced. And no amount of loyalty could justify betrayal. He had taken my signature, my peace, and almost my life. But what he didn't know yet was that I had taken something from him too, the illusion that I'd ever be afraid again. The investigation began quietly, the way most storms do. Evelyn and I met with Detective Harris at the Rutland County Sheriff's Office, a gray brick building that smelled of burnt coffee and wet coats. He was a tall man in his 50s with eyes that didn't miss much and a voice that had seen too many family disputes turn violent. "We've reviewed the hospital records and the notary correspondence," he said, flipping through his folder. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Ms. Keene. It's a coordinated fraud." I nodded, though my stomach churned. "Will he be arrested?" "Eventually," Harris said. "But we need to prove he intended to steal, not just that he made a mistake." "Say, people like your brother hide behind family language. We'll need witnesses." I thought of the guests at Mom's birthday. Most had looked away when I fell. Still, Evelyn was ready. She handed Harris a USB drive, video from the party. A guest recorded everything. Harris plugged it into his laptop, and for a few seconds there was only the hum of the machine and the sound of glasses clinking. Then came Thomas's voice, slurred, commanding, followed by my own, trembling but firm. "I'm not signing lies." The next sound was impact, the punch, the crash, the gasp of guests. Harris paused the video and looked at me. "That's assault, ma'am." The words hung in the air like a verdict. When we left the station, the Vermont air cut cold against my face, but I could breathe again. For the first time, someone had called it what it was. Not a family fight. A crime. Within a week, subpoenas went out to the notary office, the bank, and the county clerk. Evelyn moved fast, her old instincts sharper than ever. "We'll freeze the transfer before he can sell," she said. "He thinks he's clever, but crooks like Thomas always leave fingerprints even if they're digital." That night, she called again. "You need to know something. He's draining your mother's accounts." My chest tightened. What bank records show withdrawals over $10,000 in 3 days? He's moving cash through a business account under his name. "He's stealing from her now," I said. "He's accelerating because he knows he's cornered." "We can file for emergency conservatorship," Evelyn replied. "But I need your mother to sign off." I exhaled bitterly. "That won't happen. She thinks I'm attacking him." "Then we use evidence. The court will see the pattern, control, coercion, violence. It's elder abuse and financial exploitation rolled into one." The next morning, I met Harris again. He slid a photo across the desk, a security cam still of Thomas at the local bank holding a folder, his face tilted toward the teller. "He withdrew $15,000 cash here," Harris said. "We already flagged the transaction. Can you stop him?" I asked. "We can slow him down." Later that day, a new message arrived on my phone. "You really called the cops?" "Pathetic. Mom says you're tearing this family apart." I didn't reply. I forwarded it straight to Harris. "Good," he said over the phone. "Let him keep talking. Every message builds our case." By the end of the week, Evelyn had compiled a 60-page affidavit, screenshots, texts, the video, medical documentation, and financial statements showing forged signatures and illegal transfers. Reading it felt like walking through my own past mapped out in paper cuts and bruises. Each page screamed a truth my family had spent years denying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment when I could have stopped him earlier, when he shouted at Mom, when he snatched mail, when he slammed his fist on the table. I had mistaken endurance for strength, but endurance without action is just submission. The next morning, Harris called with an update. "A warrant's in motion. We're coordinating with the state attorney. He'll face charges for assault, forgery, and elder exploitation." I almost didn't believe it. "So soon?" "He's arrogant," Harris said. "People like that always assume they're untouchable. That's when we get them." Still, fear lingered. Every time I heard a car outside my apartment, my heart jumped. Evelyn insisted I stay at her place for a few nights. Her home was lined with law books and warm lamplight, a place built on structure and reason, everything my childhood home wasn't. Over tea, she said, "He'll try to spin it, say, you're vindictive or crazy. Don't bite. Truth speaks slowly, but it lasts longer." The next day, Harris sent us a video clip from one of the party guests who had finally come forward, a waitress named Kelly. The footage showed Thomas towering over me, shoving the pen into my hand, hissing something through his teeth. "You'll sign or you'll regret it." Then came the blow. Kelly's phone had captured it perfectly steady and unflinching. When I watched it again, I felt the pain ripple through my chest all over, but beneath it was a strange satisfaction. Proof. Undeniable. The case gathered momentum. Local news caught wind of it. Vermont architect claims brother forged property deed, assaulted her at family party. My phone buzzed non-stop, reporters asking for comments. I declined all of them. The story wasn't about fame, it was about boundaries. One evening, Mom called again, her voice frail. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because no one stopped him," I said. "You can't keep saving him, Mom. He's my son, and I'm your daughter." Silence. Then a broken whisper. "I don't know who to believe." Then believe the evidence, I said, and hung up before I cried. The next morning, Harris texted one line, "Warrant approved. Arrest scheduled tomorrow at 7 a.m. I read it twice, my hands trembling. After all these years, the law was finally catching up. I looked at the folder on my desk labeled Evidence and felt something shift inside me, a quiet strength that came not from anger but from resolve. Thomas had always relied on fear, but fear only works when people stay quiet. He wanted me buried under paperwork and shame. Instead, I buried him under proof. When the sun rose the next day, it painted the Vermont hills in pale gold. I packed the file for court, zipped my coat, and looked out the window one last time before heading to the station. Somewhere out there, my brother was waking up, still convinced he controlled the story. But the story had already changed. He just didn't know it yet. The knock came just after sunrise. I was standing by the window of my mother's farmhouse, a mug of black coffee in my hand, when two police cruisers rolled quietly up the gravel drive. The sound of crunching tires was sharp against the morning frost. I didn't have to ask who they were here for. Thomas's truck sat parked crooked beside the porch, engine-cold beer cans still in the passenger seat. I stepped back from the window as the deputies approached. One of them was Detective Harris. He gave me a brief nod through the glass before disappearing around the side of the house. I heard the first knock, a heavy, deliberate pounding that shook the door. Thomas Keene, Rutland County Sheriff's Department, open up. There was silence, then the thud of footsteps and the creak of floorboards. I could almost see him waking up, trying to piece together the lie he'd tell. When the door opened, his voice was groggy and defiant. "What the hell is this?" Harris replied, calm but firm. "Mr. Keene, you're under arrest for assault, forgery, and financial exploitation. Please step outside." "You've got to be kidding me," Thomas snapped. "This is a family misunderstanding. You can explain it to the judge," Harris said. "Turn around. Don't you dare touch me." I heard a scuffle, then the metallic click of handcuffs. I stepped out onto the porch, my breath clouding in the cold. Thomas stood between two officers, wrists bound face red with anger and humiliation. His eyes found mine. "You did this," he hissed. "You ruined everything." "No," I said quietly. "You did." Mom appeared behind him, still in her nightgown, her face pale and terrified. "What's happening?" she cried. Harris turned to her gently. "Ma'am, your son has been accused of multiple felonies. You'll have a chance to speak with the investigators later." "She called them, didn't she?" Thomas shouted, jerking his head toward me. "Tell them, Mom. Tell them it's all a mistake." Her lips trembled. "Thomas!" He cut her off, spitting venom. "You always took her side, even now. You're letting her destroy this family." I took a step closer, my voice steady though my hands shook. "You destroyed it the moment you raised your hand to me." His jaw clenched, eyes full of hate. "You think you're better than us because you've got money, a city job, your fancy degree. You're nothing without this house." Harris pulled him toward the cruiser. "That house isn't yours to use as a weapon," I said. He sneered. "Enjoy your victory, Laura. You just put Mom through hell." "No," I said softly. "I'm ending it." The deputies guided him into the back seat, the door slamming shut with a sound that echoed across the yard. The air felt different after that, emptier but cleaner, like the moment after a storm when the sky finally clears. Mom sank into a chair on the porch, her eyes glassy with disbelief. "You called the police on your own brother," she whispered. "I didn't call them," I said. "The law did." She looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He'll never forgive you." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I said. "I'm asking for accountability." Harris approached hat in hand. "He'll be processed this morning. The district attorney's already reviewing the file. We'll keep you updated." "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded and walked back to his car. The convoy pulled out of the driveway, taillights fading down the road, until all that was left was the sound of wind through the trees. Mom sat in silence for a long time. "He's my son," she said, finally, voice breaking. "How am I supposed to choose?" "You don't have to choose," I said. "You just have to stop pretending what he did is love." She didn't answer. She stood slowly, went back inside, and shut the door. I stayed on the porch, letting the cold bite through my coat. I should have felt relief, but what I felt was a hollow ache. The kind that comes after you finally win a battle you never wanted to fight. Later that morning, my phone buzzed with alerts. Local headlines flashed across the screen. "Local realtor arrested for forgery and assault at family party." The article mentioned my name once buried in the middle. It didn't describe the fear the hospital bed or the nights I couldn't sleep, but I didn't need it to. The truth was finally public, and that was enough. Evelyn called around noon. They booked him. Bail denied. The judge cited risk of witness intimidation. I exhaled. So he stays in jail for now. Next step is the hearing. I thanked her, though the words felt too small. When the call ended, I walked down the hill to the frozen pond behind the house. The reflection of the sky wavered on the thin ice, fragile and unsteady. I crouched down, brushed away the snow, and whispered, "It's over." But deep down, I knew it wasn't not yet. Mom's silence still lingered like a wound that wouldn't close. I went back inside and found her in the living room clutching a framed photo of us from years ago, me, Thomas, and Dad by the lake. "I keep wondering where I went wrong," she said. "Maybe it started when I taught you both to never talk back." "Maybe," I said softly, "but it ends now." She looked up at me, eyes tired. "You've always been strong, Laura. I just never realized how much it cost you." I sat beside her. I didn't either. Until now. Outside, the wind picked up rattling the bare branches. I thought of Thomas in a cold cell, stripped of his swagger, of his keys of control. I didn't feel pity, only a quiet certainty that justice, however delayed, was finally moving. The farmhouse creaked old wood, settling around us. Somewhere beyond the hills, a siren wailed faintly, fading into silence. I took my mother's hand, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. For the first time, I didn't feel like the child in this house. I felt like its keeper. The first day of the trial began with snow falling outside the Vermont State Courthouse, flakes drifting against the tall windows like pale ghosts of every truth I had buried for years. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Evelyn Ross, my hands clasped together so tightly the knuckles turned white. Across from me sat Thomas in a navy suit that didn't fit his wrists, still marked faintly from the cuffs. He looked smaller than I remembered, his arrogance dimmed but not gone. When our eyes met, he smirked. That same smirk that used to silence every argument in our house. But not today. The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers. Reporters had filled the benches. Local families from Maple Hill had come out of curiosity or guilt, and at the front the flag hung motionless in the still air. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Honorable Marion Bates, entered, and the room rose. Her eyes were sharp, her tone firm. "This court will hear the case of Laura Keene versus Thomas Keene regarding charges of felony forgery, assault, and elder financial exploitation." My breath trembled as she spoke my name out loud. It didn't sound weak anymore. Evelyn stood first. "Your Honor, my client seeks justice for crimes committed under the guise of family. This is not about inheritance. It is about coercion, violence, and theft." Thomas's attorney, a slick man in a shiny tie, rose next. "Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a sister seeking revenge. The defendant maintains this was a heated argument, nothing more." "A heated argument doesn't require stitches," Evelyn replied. The judge raised her hand. "Proceed with evidence." The first piece entered into record was the video. The lights dimmed slightly as the footage played on the screen. There I was, standing beside Mom's birthday cake holding the pen. The guests smiling, unaware of the explosion about to come. Then Thomas's voice filled the courtroom, demanding, mocking, and then the sudden movement, his arm swinging the crash. The gasp from the audience rippled like a wave. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. When the video ended, silence hung thick. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector. Evelyn turned to the judge. "This is not rumor, Your Honor. This is recorded truth. My client was hospitalized with 2 fractured ribs and a concussion. The assault was witnessed by over 40 guests. The defense attorney stood trying to recover. The defendant deeply regrets the physical altercation. He was intoxicated and reacting to emotional provocation. He never intended serious harm." Evelyn's voice sharpened. "And the forged deed. Was that an accident too?" She held up a document encased in a clear sleeve. "This is the property transfer that Thomas Keene filed 3 days before the assault. The signature was not handwritten. It was digitally lifted from Ms. Keene's tax filings. The notary office confirmed irregularities, and the clerk's timestamp shows deliberate falsification. She walked closer to the defense table. Your client forged his sister's name to steal their mother's home, then attacked her when she refused to play along. The attorney tried to interject, but the judge spoke first. Mr. Keene, do you wish to address this claim? Thomas stood straightening his tie, his tone full of forced calm. I admit to signing her name, but it was meant to protect the family property. My sister's been distant for years. I handled the house maintenance, the taxes, everything. I thought she'd agree eventually. I rose slowly, unable to stay silent. You thought I'd agree to a lie, I said. The judge motioned for me to stay seated, but her expression softened. You may speak briefly, Ms. Keene. I looked straight at Thomas. You didn't forge my name to protect anyone. You did it because control is all you've ever known. You hit me because I stopped being afraid of you. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing into something dark and familiar. You think you're a victim, he spat. You've been undermining me for years. You did that yourself, I said quietly. One signature at a time. Evelyn placed her hand on my arm, signaling me to stop. The judge nodded. Thank you, Ms. Keene. Please resume your seat. Then she turned to the bailiff. Bring in the next witness. The door opened and Mom walked in slowly, a shawl around her shoulders, her steps unsteady. My heart twisted. I hadn't seen her since the arrest. She avoided my eyes as she took the stand. The clerk swore her in, and Evelyn approached gently. Mrs. Keene, do you remember the night of your 70th birthday? Yes, Mom said softly. Can you tell the court what happened? Thomas made a speech. He said Laura was giving me the house. I thought it was true. I didn't know there were papers. Did you see Thomas ask Laura to sign anything? Mom hesitated. Yes, she said no. He got angry. Angry enough to hit her? Evelyn asked. Tears filled Mom's eyes. I closed my eyes when he shouted. When I opened them, she was on the floor. Evelyn nodded gently. Thank you, ma'am. Did your son tell you afterward why he needed those documents? He said it was for insurance that Laura had agreed earlier. Did you believe him? Mom looked at me for the first time. I wanted to. Evelyn's voice softened. Mrs. Keene, do you believe him now? Mom's voice broke. No. The courtroom went silent, except for the scribbling of reporters. The defense attorney declined cross-examination. When Mom stepped down, I caught her glance, a mixture of guilt and release. Next, the notary officer testified, confirming the forgery process. Then, Detective Harris took the stand. He detailed the financial transfers the fake company Thomas had created, the bank withdrawals labeled as maintenance expenses. In your professional opinion, Evelyn asked, did the defendant exploit his mother's finances? Yes, Harris said firmly, and he used intimidation to maintain control over both women. By the time Evelyn rested her case, the weight of the truth had filled the room so completely it was almost hard to breathe. The defense had little left. Thomas's attorney tried one last angle. Your Honor, my client is remorseful. He wishes to apologize publicly to his sister. The judge nodded slightly. You may speak. Thomas stood, turning toward me. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who fixed my bike chain when we were kids, the one who used to sneak candy into my lunchbox. But then he opened his mouth and the illusion vanished. I'm sorry, he said, voice low. Sorry you took things so personally. I was trying to keep the family together. A murmur spread through the audience. Evelyn rose immediately. Your Honor, that's not an apology. That's manipulation. The judge agreed. Sit down, Mr. Keene. The closing arguments came that afternoon. Evelyn's voice was calm, but it carried power. Your Honor, we are often told that blood is thicker than water, that family deserves forgiveness no matter the sin. But family cannot exist without trust, and trust dies the moment one hand is raised to strike another. Laura Keene is not seeking vengeance. She is seeking restoration of her name, her safety, and her right to exist without fear. She paused, then added softly, family does not excuse violence. Blood does not erase crime. The defense's argument was brief, hollow, a plea for leniency cloaked in family rhetoric. When they finished, the judge removed her glasses and folded her hands. I have reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the video record. This court finds Thomas Keene guilty of felony forgery, aggravated assault, and elder financial exploitation. The words hit like the first breath after drowning. Thomas's shoulders sagged. His attorney muttered something about an appeal, but the judge's voice cut through. You will serve 7 years in state prison, followed by restitution to your sister and mother. This court will also order the reversal of all property transfers under your fraudulent signature. She looked directly at him. Mr. Keene, you have used family as both shield and weapon. Today, that ends. Her gavel struck once. The sound echoed through every hollow space left inside me. Thomas turned toward me as the bailiff approached. You'll regret this, he muttered. I stood slowly meeting his eyes. You wanted the house, I said. Now you'll have 4 walls of your own. He glared, but for the first time there was fear in his expression. They led him away, the chain around his wrists glinting in the courtroom light. Mom began to sob quietly in the gallery, covering her face with her hands. Evelyn exhaled beside me, whispering, "It's done." But I knew it wasn't really done. Justice doesn't erase the past, it just stops it from repeating. As I walked out of the courthouse, cameras flashed, microphones reached toward me, voices shouting questions about forgiveness and family. I kept walking. Outside, snow had stopped falling. The courthouse steps glistened with ice, reflecting pale sunlight. Mom waited near the bottom, her shawl wrapped tight. When I reached her, she looked up and said, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner." I took her hand. Believing now is enough. We stood there for a long moment as the crowd thinned and the air grew still. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving my family. I felt like I had reclaimed it, the truth, the name, the peace. Evelyn joined us, her voice light. You did well in there. We did, I said. You turned his paperwork into proof. She smiled. He wanted to bury you in signatures. Instead, you signed his sentence. We laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. I looked back at the courthouse one last time, the columns rising against the winter sky, and thought about every bruise, every silence, every time I was told to let it go. I hadn't let it go. I had let it end. And that finally felt like peace. When the verdict settled, it felt like winter had lifted from my chest. Thomas was gone. The house was quiet again, but silence has a strange weight when it follows years of chaos. The morning after the sentencing, I woke to a cold kitchen and a sun that felt foreign, too bright, too indifferent. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from reporters and distant relatives who suddenly discovered morality. I ignored them all. Justice had been served, but justice doesn't bring peace. It just clears the air long enough to breathe. A week later, Evelyn called. He's been transferred to Rutland Correctional Facility, she said. 7 years minimum, no parole for the first 3. What about Mom? I asked. She's shaken, but she's coming around. Coming around to what reality? I drove up to Vermont that afternoon. The farmhouse looked smaller now, stripped of Thomas's energy, no more shouting or slammed doors. Mom was sitting by the window in her armchair, a blanket over her knees, sunlight touching her hair. You didn't have to come, she said softly as I entered. I wanted to, I replied. It's quiet now. Too quiet, she whispered. For a long time we sat in that stillness. Then she turned to me, eyes glistening. I went through the attic last night, found letters from your father. He wrote about both of you, how he worried Thomas might never learn contentment, and how proud he was of you for never letting anger win. I swallowed hard. Dad always thought he could fix everything with love. He was wrong, she said. Sometimes love blinds you. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and handed me an envelope. It came yesterday. My stomach dropped when I saw the prison stamp. Inside was a short letter written in Thomas's slanted handwriting. I hope you're happy now. You turned Mom against me. You took everything I had left. I folded it back slowly. He still doesn't get it, I said. He thinks this was revenge. Some people never learn the difference between consequence and cruelty, Mom said quietly. We burned the letter in the fireplace. The flames licked the paper until it curled into ash sparks, lifting into the chimney like ghosts of a story finally finished. In the weeks that followed, word spread through the small town. Neighbors stopped pretending not to know what had happened. The local paper printed an editorial about elder financial abuse in Vermont, using our story anonymized but unmistakable. People nodded at me differently now, some with pity, others with admiration. It didn't matter. I hadn't done it for applause. I had done it because it was the only way to stop the bleeding. Thomas lost everything. His realtor license revoked his assets, seized his reputation shredded. The man who once boasted about closing six-figure deals now spent his days counting hours in a gray cell. Evelyn called again a month later. "You've been granted full conservatorship of your mother's estate. The court approved the reversal of all fraudulent transfers. So the house is legally mine again. Yours and your mother's," she said. "You can rebuild it however you want." When I drove there the next weekend, the snow had melted into soft mud. I opened the door and was met with dust and sunlight. The walls still bore faint stains from years of neglect, but under them was the home Dad built solid, patient, forgiving. I ran my fingers along the kitchen table where Thomas had once slammed his fists, and for the first time it didn't tremble beneath my touch. That evening, as the sky turned amber, I sat with Mom on the porch. She wore her favorite shawl again, her voice steadier now. "I went to see him," she said. My chest tightened. "Why?" "Because I had to look at him and know what kind of son I raised." And she looked out toward the fields, her face unreadable. "He said he's angry that prison is cold and loud, but then he said something that surprised me. He said, maybe she finally taught me something." I stared at her. "He said that—" "Yes," she nodded. I don't know if he meant it, but it's the first time I've ever heard him admit he was wrong. We sat in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. Somewhere far away, a train horn echoed across the hills. I realized then that closure isn't a single moment, it's a series of quiet understandings. Mom reached over, squeezed my hand. "You were right to fight back. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I smiled faintly. "You don't have to apologize. Just don't forget." "I won't." That night, after she went to bed, I walked through the house one last time before returning to Boston. I paused at the living room wall where the old family portrait once hung. The nail was still there, but the picture was gone. I left it that way. Some walls are better left bare. When I stepped outside, the air smelled of pine and earth, the kind of scent that carries memory without pain. I looked up at the night sky, at the faint trace of stars above the Vermont hills, and whispered, "He thought blood meant ownership, but blood only stains." The next morning, I got a text from Evelyn. "The restitution check cleared. You're officially done." I typed back, "No, I'm finally beginning." The spring that followed felt like an entirely different world. Snow had melted from the Vermont hills, revealing soft green grass and the faint scent of pine that carried through the valley. For the first time in years, the farmhouse didn't feel haunted by shouting or silence. It simply breathed. I moved back temporarily to oversee the renovations, and each morning began the same way. Coffee steaming in my hands, sunlight spilling through the cracked kitchen window, the sound of hammers in the distance. Workers replaced the roof, repaired the porch railings, and painted the walls a warm cream. But there was one thing: I refused to change the small fracture in the hardwood floor by the dining table, the same spot where my blood had once pooled. When the foreman offered to fix it, I shook my head. "Leave it," I said. "A scar's just proof you survived." At night, I slept in my old bedroom, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and paper. Mom had moved into a nearby assisted living residence at her own request. "I want you to have your life back," she told me when I helped her pack. "And I need to learn how to live mine without fear." We visited each other often, and though her steps were slower, her spirit had grown lighter. We spoke of small things, flowers, weather recipes, but behind each conversation was a silent apology, the kind that doesn't need words. I spent my days clearing the garden, restoring Dad's workshop, and writing late into the night. I had kept journals through everything: the hospital stay, the court hearings, the letters, even the silence. Now those pages became the foundation for something new. Evelyn encouraged me to publish my story in a local legal journal to raise awareness about elder financial abuse. Instead, I wanted to build something tangible, something that would outlive both the pain and the apology. That summer, I founded an organization called Silver Rights, dedicated to helping elderly victims and women coerced into signing away property under family pressure. Our mission was simple: to turn fear into documentation, silence into action. The first meeting was held right in the renovated farmhouse. 5 women came: one who had lost her savings to her son's addiction, another whose husband tricked her into a reverse mortgage. We sat around the dining table, the same one that had once witnessed betrayal, and drank tea while they told their stories. No cameras, no headlines, just truth. "You're not alone," I told them. "You're not crazy, and you're not ungrateful for wanting justice. You're just tired of pretending abuse is love." Their nods were small but heavy with understanding. As the organization grew, so did the sense of purpose I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I started giving workshops at community centers, partnering with attorneys who volunteered their time. The farmhouse became a hub, a place of quiet rebellion where women could reclaim their names, their signatures, their peace. One evening, while sorting donation letters, I found a package in the mailbox with no return address. Inside was a folded drawing, a blueprint of the farmhouse labeled in my father's handwriting. At the bottom, in faded ink, it read, "For when you rebuild." My breath caught. He must have drawn it decades ago, a plan he never got to finish. I placed it in a frame above my desk. Every line of that sketch reminded me that even broken legacies can be redesigned. That night, I sat on the porch with a notebook and wrote the closing lines of the article I'd promised Evelyn I'd write for the Vermont Law Review. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reform. I used to draw blueprints for homes I wrote. Now I help people rebuild theirs. When it was published, letters began arriving, some from lawyers, some from victims, many from strangers who simply wanted to say thank you for speaking what we couldn't. Each one felt like a brick in a new foundation. The house that once witnessed betrayal now echoed with voices of survival. On the first anniversary of the trial, I hosted a small open house at the farm. The front porch was strung with white lights. The air smelled of lilacs, and laughter replaced the tension that used to live in those walls. Mom came escorted by a nurse, and when she saw the crowd, her eyes filled with tears. "He'd hate this," she whispered, half smiling. "That's how I know it's right," I said. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I stood on the porch steps and addressed the group. A year ago, this house was evidence I began. Now it's proof that we can begin again. What happened here doesn't define who we are, it defines what we refuse to become. Applause followed, quiet but sincere. After the guests left and the lights dimmed, I stood at the edge of the yard, looking out over the lake that mirrored the moonlight. The reflection trembled with each breeze, a reminder that peace isn't stillness, it's motion without panic. I whispered to the night, "It's done." But then I smiled because I knew it wasn't really done. Healing never is. It's not a destination. It's a habit, a daily choice to rebuild without resentment. Before heading inside, I looked back at the window, where the light from my father's blueprint glowed faintly on the wall. The house stood steady again, not because it had been repaired, but because the truth had finally taken root. And as I locked the door, I realized something simple yet profound. Survival is its own kind of architecture. You design it with boundaries, frame it with truth, and paint it with peace until it finally feels like home again. 3 years after the verdict, Vermont had changed the way I saw seasons. Spring no longer meant endings, it meant continuations. The farmhouse had become both home and headquarters for civil rights, and each morning began with the same rhythm: coffee brewing, the mailbox creaking, and the sound of my rescue dog Jasper padding across the porch. Life had settled into a kind of peace that didn't ask for perfection, only persistence. Then, one April morning, I found a letter in the pile of mail. The envelope was stamped with the emblem of Rutland Correctional Facility. My hands stilled. The handwriting was unmistakable. Thomas's slanted scrawl, impatient and uneven. I took it inside, sat by the kitchen window, and stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Laura," it began. "I don't expect you to answer this. I just wanted to tell you I've been thinking a lot about that night. About everything. I used to tell myself you were cruel, that you hated me, that you enjoyed watching me fall. But I think now I hated you because you weren't afraid. You were what I pretended to be, free." I read the words twice. They didn't sound like the Thomas I knew. There was no manipulation, no excuses. Just a strange, hollow honesty. The letter continued. I keep seeing Mom's face the day they took me away. I thought I'd never forgive you for that. But then I realized I don't deserve forgiveness. I only wanted control. You gave me consequence. I hope you never doubt what you did. Maybe it's too late to say thank you, but thank you anyway." There was no signature, just his name typed at the bottom in block letters as if written by someone else. I folded the letter slowly and placed it in a drawer beside Dad's old blueprint where I kept the things that shaped me, but no longer ruled me. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't feel something, but because I had already spent years doing that. Regret doesn't fix anything, but sometimes it closes a door quietly instead of slamming it. A week later, Mom and I visited the old cemetery by the lake to place flowers on Dad's grave. She was quieter now, age softening her voice into something more deliberate. "Do you ever think he'll change?" she asked, her eyes on the horizon. "I think he already has," I said, "even if no one sees it." She nodded, touching the headstone gently. "You know, when you were little, your father used to say you'd be the one to rebuild what others break." I didn't know how true that would be. "Neither did I said. As we walked back to the car, the lake shimmered under the afternoon light. Its surface rippled with wind, and for a moment it looked like liquid glass. That night, I sat at my desk, surrounded by folders and letters from people civil rights had helped women who'd taken back homes, men who'd fought back against manipulative relatives, survivors who'd finally been believed. I lit a candle more out of ritual than necessity and reread Thomas's letter once more before slipping it into a new folder labeled Closure. It didn't mean forgiveness. It meant finality. Before bed, I stepped outside with Jasper. The air was cool, the stars faint against the dark Vermont sky. The porch light hummed softly. Somewhere beyond the hills was the prison where my brother now lived out his sentence, his freedom measured in days and regrets. I didn't wish him suffering. I only wished him awareness. For the first time, that felt like enough. Back inside, I walked to the living room and opened the drawer where the original forged deed had been filed away as evidence years ago. Now, voided and stamped, invalid, it was just a piece of paper. I took a fountain pen, dipped it into the small bottle of ink beside it, and signed a new document. One declaring the official establishment of the Keene Foundation, a branch of civil rights that would fund legal aid for victims of domestic and financial coercion. As the ink dried, I whispered, "You taught me one thing. Thomas, never sign away your peace." I placed both papers side by side, one born of betrayal, the other of redemption. In the reflection of the window, I saw the woman I had become. Not the girl who once begged for peace, but the woman who built it with her own hands. When dawn finally broke, the first light spilled across the lake like forgiveness not offered, not asked for, but simply existing. I stood at the porch railing, the wind cool against my face, and whispered into the morning air, "It's over." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't really about endings. It was about living beyond them. If you've made it this far, you already understand what silence costs. It's not measured in bruises or bank accounts, it's measured in years of lost peace. In nights when you convince yourself that keeping quiet is kindness. I believed that too once. I believed that protecting family meant absorbing the pain they caused. But silence doesn't save peace. It buries it. My story isn't unique. It's one of thousands across America stories that don't make the evening news because they happen behind front doors that look ordinary around dinner tables, that sound polite, inside families that swear they're fine. But silence thrives in those places. It disguises itself as love, as loyalty, as not making a scene. If you've ever been told to stay quiet for family's sake, I want you to know this peace built on silence isn't peace. It's captivity. Speak anyway. Even if your voice shakes, even if you lose people along the way, even if they call you ungrateful or cruel, because truth will always cost something, but silence will cost everything. I learned that the hard way. The day my brother hit me, I thought the world ended, but it didn't. It began. Every bruise healed. Every scar became a map leading me somewhere new to a place where I could stand without apology. Maybe you're there right now, sitting in a quiet house, pretending everything's fine, convincing yourself it's too late to start over. It's not. It's never too late to rewrite what they told you was permanent. You don't have to build an organization or take someone to court to claim your voice. You only have to take one step, report it, tell a friend, write it down, whisper it if you must. Every sound counts. Every word breaks the pattern. And when you speak, you'll find others waiting for you, people who've been carrying the same secret weight, waiting for someone to prove it's survivable. That's what civil rights became a place for those who thought no one would believe them. Women, men, children of aging parents, all finding each other in shared truth. We didn't build it from charity. We built it from exhaustion, from being told to endure one more lie, one more insult, one more betrayal wrapped in the word family. We decided to stop enduring and start existing. If you're watching this from somewhere far away, maybe in a small apartment, maybe on a quiet porch, maybe from a hospital bed, I'm talking to you. Don't wait for permission to protect yourself. Don't wait for the apology that will never come. Protect your name. Protect your boundaries. Protect your peace. And if you've already fought and survived, if you've already broken free, then use your story like a light. Someone else needs to see it. Someone else is still trapped where you were. Tell them what freedom sounds like. Tell them it doesn't sound like victory, it sounds like quiet breathing at 2 a.m. when you finally feel safe enough to sleep. If you've ever fought to protect what's yours, type the word boundaries in the comments. Tell me your city. I want to know how far this story travels, how many of us there are who refused to sign away our peace. Because that's what this was never about: a house, a deed, or an inheritance. It was about ownership of the self, the only thing no one else can claim unless you hand it to them. If this story reached you, if it stirred something you've kept hidden, don't let it fade when the video ends. Share it, comment, start the conversation where silence used to live. Because somewhere out there, another Laura Keene is watching, still doubting, still afraid, still waiting for proof that it's possible to survive what she's living through. Be her proof. Let her know that family doesn't excuse violence. Blood doesn't buy respect, and peace isn't a gift, it's a decision. One you can make right now. When this story ends, something larger begins. You might be sitting in your living room right now, phone in hand, wondering why a stranger's story hit you so hard. Maybe it's because you've lived a version of it. Maybe it's because you've watched someone you love fade under someone else's control. Or maybe it's because deep down you know how close silence can sit beside you, polite, familiar, convincing you that keeping peace is the same as being safe. But you're here. You stayed until the end. That means a part of you already refuses to stay quiet. This isn't just my voice or Laura's, it's ours. The truth is, every view, every comment, every shared story becomes a ripple in something much bigger than a single courtroom or family fight. It becomes a map of resistance, proof that we exist, that we're paying attention, that we care about what happens behind those closed doors. So before you scroll away, I want to ask you something simple. Don't let this story die here. If you've ever known what it feels like to shrink inside your own home, type the word voice in the comments. If you've ever watched someone lose everything because no one believed them, type believe. And if you've ever stood up even once when it terrified you, tell me your city. Tell me where you found the courage to say no, because every time you do, you remind the next person that they're not alone. I read your comments. I see your names, your towns, your stories. When someone writes Houston, Texas still healing, or Ohio trying to start over, or Oregon finally safe, it isn't just data on a screen. It's a constellation of survival stretching across states and generations. It's proof that strength doesn't disappear when people stop watching, it multiplies. You might think your story doesn't matter, that no one would care if you spoke up. But the truth is, you have no idea who's watching, who's reading your words in the middle of the night, trying to find their own reflection in your courage. One voice becomes two. Two become 10. 10 become a chorus that no abuser, no manipulator, no lie can drown out. That's what this channel was built for, not just to tell stories, but to build a circle of people who know that justice starts small. It starts with one person saying, "This happened to me," and another saying, "It happened to me too." That's how silence breaks one confession at a time. And when enough people speak, it stops being a confession. It becomes truth. So share this story, not for numbers, not for clicks, but for the person who still thinks they're crazy, for feeling unsafe, for the daughter who keeps deleting drafts of her goodbye letter, for the son who still believes anger equals love. Let them see that peace is possible and that boundaries are not betrayal. Let them know that survival doesn't make them damaged, it makes them proof. If you're a survivor, a supporter, or someone who just refuses to look away anymore, hit subscribe. Join the space where we talk about what others hide, where silence ends and healing starts, where we rewrite what family means one story at a time. Because justice isn't a headline, it's a habit. It's built every day by people who refuse to sign away their truth, their freedom, or their peace. You are part of that, right now in this moment, by watching, by feeling, by remembering. So type your word. Share your city. Tell me your story. Let's see how far this voice can travel, how far yours can echo. Because when we speak, we don't just end silence. We build something louder, braver, unbreakable. And somewhere, someone still trapped in their own quiet will hear you and think, maybe it's time I speak too.